Hi, this is 27th January 2016. We are here at Mike Fremont's house. Mike is 93-year-old. He's a runner and a canoer and very vital and healthy. And we are here to hear from Mike about his life story. This interview is being conducted with the help of Richard Brown. He's a professional photographer and he has very kindly helped us in conducting this interview. We are doing this interview for Plant Pure Nation and myself, Preeti Bansal Kshirsagar. I'm Regional Manager Midwest for Plant Pure Nation and we are here at Mike Fremont's house in Cincinnati. So Mike, thank you so much for giving us your time today. I'm really grateful for that.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So we would like to start the interview with getting to know you a little bit more. So tell us something about your life story. Where did your life begin? Tell us about your family.
I had a successful birth in 1922 in Cincinnati, and I had an elder sister, and I had two parents, and we were not rich and we were not poor, but we were happy. And I went to Walnut Hills High School, and I went further to college, and then I worked for 4 different manufacturing firms, and at the age of 26 I set up my own business in Cincinnati, which is carried on by my son who lives in Cincinnati. I have another son who lives in California and a daughter who lives in Providence, Rhode Island. I was happily going along in my life until my wife died, and 2 weeks after our 3rd child was born. And that was rather stressful for me. And so instead of having a martini after work, I decided I'd better run. And that was quite a successful response to the stress I felt myself under.
That's something.
So I didn't run competitively for many years, but it was fun. And I enjoyed running on beaches barefoot and through the forests, beautiful trees, and didn't matter what season it was. And finally I got attracted. Someone said, "Why don't you get in a race?" And so I got in a race, and I found I wasn't too bad. And I decided I'd continue running. So I left the martinis behind, shall we say. And all went well, you might say. The business succeeded. And at the age of about 70, I found that I had cancer. And it was, they called it colo-rectal cancer. And they said, "You have about 3 months to live unless you get operated." Well, fortuitously, my elder son, living in California at the time, had sent me 5 years before a book called the Cancer Prevention Book. And I called him to ask him why he'd sent it to me and thank him for it. And he said, "Well, you may need it someday." So quite naturally, I didn't read it until I was diagnosed 5 years later at the Cleveland Clinic. And of course, I immediately read it in one day and cleaned out my kitchen, changed my diet to what was then known as the Macrobiotic Diet, and still is, but gradually over the years from that time, which was 1991, I have not changed essentially the nature of my diet. In the first year, I shrank the tumor, and I felt very good. And the only thing I did was give up running and marathon canoe racing because they put a stress on your immune system. Everybody knows that, I think. So in the first year, I didn't do those things. But as second year took place, I eventually began to bleed again, and I had to be operated. That was 2¼ years after the original diagnosis. And the surgeon who operated upon me told my wife that he had looked for metastasis in 35 places and found none. So what that told me was that in that 2¼ years from the diagnosis, that the diet I was on itself had cured the metastasis. If I had listened to the doctors and been operated within 3 months of the diagnosis, I would have been left with the metastasis, which they would, in those days, have had to treat with chemotherapy and or radiation. In those days, and still I think today, it's a dangerous, risky proposition to have it done, but you have to have it done. So I may then, at that time, have saved my own life through the diet that I was on. Does that sort of answer your first question?
It does, absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about the macrobiotic diet.
The only thing that is different in the macrobiotic diet from the, shall we say, whole foods, plant-based diet is that the macrobiotic diet said it's okay to have fish once a week, as long as it's a sole or a flounder that lives on the bottom of the sea, and as long as you don't fry it, because these diets frown on oil, and particularly fried foods. Otherwise, the diet as expressed in the books on macrobiotics are primarily Japanese-based. There's a lot of rice. I remember buying 25 pounds of short grain brown rice for $25. And that would have taken me about a year to consume. So it's not very expensive. But otherwise, I can't, not being a dietitian or a nutritionist, I can't tell you the differences between that and what people view as a vegan diet. And the whole foods plant-based is primarily, is 100% of what I do today. And even that permits you to take 6-packs, I believe, and Krispy Kremes, which I don't do either, not 6-packs either. So I'm I guess absolutely a pure vegan, if you want to call it that. Trying also to use common sense so as not to eat profuse quantities of bad stuff that are not animal protein.
Right, yeah.
So all these diets say no animal protein. I don't know if the macrobiotic has changed with its respect to fish, but I haven't had any animal protein which includes eggs, by the way, and milk. Haven't had any of that now for 25 years. And mind you, I had this operation when I was 70, and by the time I was 80, I found I was beginning to make athletic records in the United States in age groups 80 to 84 and 85 to 89 and 89 to 94. And then
Wow.
a few years later, I was beginning to make world records, world single age records, beginning at age 88 and continuing age 90 and 92. And then that is in the full marathon. And in the half marathon, I set a world record at the age of 90. And also, did you tell me it was 91 and 92?
91 and 92. Yes, that is correct.
At age 93, I had some difficulties with my shoulder from canoe racing and from some sort of bursitis and tendonitis that kept me away from running a half marathon in 93. But I think I'll be okay to do the same thing in 94, for which, I mean, at the age of 94, which has no, as I understand it, that has actually no world record established by anybody. So that's my aim anyway. I may not make it, but I hope to have fun doing it.
I'm sure you will.
Have I responded?
Absolutely, Mike.
to
Yes, yes. And I just want to say that Mike is going to turn 94 in a month from now, so I'm pretty confident that you will make the next world record for the half marathon in a few months.
Well, that would be a lot of fun, even though it doesn't pay.
So, Mike, you said that you started your dietary changes with moving completely to a whole food plant-based diet, or not completely, but to a great extent, to a whole food plant-based diet with some fish as part of your...
Once a week.
Once a week, yes. How was this change for you?
It didn't make any obvious difference to me to take fish out of my diet. It never was that important.
My question was more about when you moved from a typical American diet to the macrobiotic diet.
That was difficult. I would go through grocery stores and salivate when I went past the crackers and cookies, all those wonderful things. But after a few weeks on a macrobiotic diet, I really wasn't that interested. I mean, in those days, if you told me if I ate a mixture of, as someone else put it, fish skins chopped and oakum, and it'll make me well, that's what I would have eaten. Because there was a pistol at my head, and I had to do something. That made it very easy to change, even though I lusted for the wrong foods for a short time. Mm-hmm. That long ago disappeared. No problem.
That is great. And I mean, you are obviously also, you were not eating any of the processed vegan foods, which are not really a part of the whole food plant-based diet, but which are still plant-based but are processed. And you
I use my best judgment, and if you're interested in the subject, you learn a great deal about what you should and shouldn't eat, even though it's not. I mean, the thousands and thousands of beliefs and diets, and new diets every day, but you begin to sort them out after a while, so as to protect yourself. By the way, it is apparently true that people who get very old, and I have to say I'm one of them, you lose a certain amount of your taste buds. So it isn't all that important as long as the food is clean, what the heck it really tastes like.
Well, that is true, but I also believe that even at a younger age, when we start eating differently, our taste buds evolve with that. They change. So for instance, I know this interview is not about me, but I just want to say that after I moved to a whole food plant-based diet, I think around 3 years back, I see that my appetite and my palate for foods has changed drastically. Foods that did not taste that good to me 3 years back are now delicious to me, and foods for which I used to salivate are no more interesting to me anymore.
Well, your body simply adapts to what there is to eat. So if it puts you on a new diet, even if it's better or worse, you adapt to it and it becomes standard for you, so it tastes good.
Absolutely, and it goes both ways, from eating unhealthy to healthy, and from going to an unhealthy diet from a healthy diet. Your body will adapt. But yes, we need to make the right choice for ourselves.
Well, I think I made clear to you that adopting this diet did something for me to make me capable of establishing these records. These are world records. I've had them now for a few years because there's nobody really challenging them. And the reason they're not challenging them is they're not healthy enough to get out there. If you get to the starting line and you're 93 years old, you're lucky to finish, much less set a record. And
Right.
I consider these diets, or that diet, I attribute it all to diet. Of course, I lead otherwise a reasonably healthy life. It's sort of stress-free. And that's the only other threat to life is, I think, stress. Eat well and don't stress yourself, and you might live a much longer time.
So if I understand you correctly, you were always athletic. You were
Yes.
always running. You were always canoeing.
Yeah.
And in spite of, and you had a reasonably stressless life, not stressless, but low stress
Yeah.
life. And in spite of that, you developed cancer when you were 70 or 69.
I sincerely believe that it was diet-caused cancer. That's a very important point to make. The standard American diet will kill you. It definitely will kill you. It'll let you live 50, 60, 70 years, and then you're dead. Many of us are. And that's what I successfully eluded. And the experience is not unique to me. There are many, many people who've done what I've done.
I agree with you. And you did not make any other changes in your life other than changing your foods when you switched your lifestyle.
That's right.
This is very profound. Just the food was the solution. So tell us something more. When you stopped eating fish, what was the trigger behind that decision to move from a primarily whole food plant-based diet to 100% whole food plant-based diet?
Well, the instigation to stop eating fish came from an elderly woman who was particularly interested in what do you call it? Wild what's the word we
Animal
use?
conservation or animal welfare?
Yes. Yes. And it didn't matter what kind of an animal it was, if it had a mother or if it had a face. That's what an animal is supposed to be. She said, don't you realize that when you take a fish out of the water, you hurt it. The hook hurts it, and it can't stand being in the air, so that it suffers. And it can't tell you that in words, but you take it from me. They are sentient beings, and you shouldn't hurt them. And here, actually, believe it or not, we are slaughtering 65 billion, billion, animals a year to eat. And of course that requires those animals to be fed throughout their lifetimes. And so we're growing enormous amounts of corn and soybeans to feed the animals. We're taking down rainforests in the Congo and in the Amazon and in Indonesia, which are those things that attract and accept carbon dioxide and give forth oxygen. So we're hurting ourselves in the global warming point of view simply because of our diet. And I am here to tell you today that you don't have to have animal protein for good health. I think I proved that for myself. It may not apply to everybody, but I think it does, because I'm pretty normal otherwise. And that may end the life of our planet if we don't change our diets. There are three people I know who are scientists who have said that if we continue this way, we are generating 51% of our global warming gases through agriculture. And by agriculture, they don't mean little farms. They're talking about these huge animal feeding operations. I may have gotten off the subject a bit, but that's what I happen to be working on today, is trying to change the nation's diet because of my own personal experience that is very, very beneficial.
This is not off subject, Mike, because these are...
I've been on a podium.
You are on a podium, and this is not off subject because all of these things are interconnected. Our health, our well-being, and our planet's well-being is interconnected. We cannot be healthy if our planet is unhealthy, and our planet cannot be healthy if the animals and species on this planet are unhealthy. So I think that eating a whole food plant-based diet and being compassionate towards other species and animals goes hand in hand. So Mike, you have been very well read. You're up to date with the latest scientific research. Does that mean that a person who wants to change their life need to have all that knowledge to really?
Of course not. Of course not. But you sort of get interested in it after a while. If you try. If you say something in my life is an illness or a threat of illness or a change in your situation that's very unhappy, if you change your life in such a way as to improve it by diet, you want to know more and more about it, and you want to get deeper and deeper into it because it becomes part of your life.
Yes, I agree with you. So you have said that this is for people who have a threat to their life or who are suffering. How about people who feel healthy?
Most all diet conversation is concerned with your weight. Everybody's concerned about weight. We're an obese nation. We're therefore a sickly nation. Therefore, health care costs us much more than it does in other nations. That's one of the main reasons. That's why people get pretty curious about it. And every place you go, every place, from grocery stores to every magazine, has diets, foods you should eat for your health. So the nation is conscious of it, and eating certain things are addictive. And it's not a simple thing to change your diet and stay on it. And it's particularly difficult if your main aim is to lose weight. The vegan diet or the macrobiotic diet or the whole foods plant-based diet, however you define them, are not terribly attractive to an average American because they leave out the addictive foods, which, as I understand it, are meats, cheese, sugar, and chocolate. And books have been written on how to get rid of these specific addictions. So that's another venture you may want to take if you get involved in playing with diet. And many people do, because their health, their looks, their attractiveness, their capability of getting certain jobs, attracting certain people, is all involved in being obese. And trying to get rid of the obesity means you have to attack certain addictions you may have. There are people I know who every now and then will eat a whole gallon of ice cream. What is that but an addiction? It has to be an addiction. Mm-hmm. So these things can be addressed, and they have been successfully. But I'm just an ordinary guy, and I changed my diet for a good reason, and it worked out for me.
But you were not obese when you got your cancer?
No.
You were...
I've weighed the same since I was in college.
Right. So it's not just for people who already have a health issue, or for people who are suffering from obesity. It's for people who are runners, who are canoers, who are healthy, but if they want to prevent from cancers developing in their body, or prevent other diseases developing in their body, they can switch to this diet when they're still healthy and non-obese.
Right. I have a friend who was 62 when we met, who ran with me, and I told him about my diet, and he was, at the time, very close to 200 pounds. And he's taller than I'm very small, but he worried about that. That was kind of a marker he didn't want to go beyond, seriously. He worried about it. And so I told him what I had done, and I told him he wouldn't put on any weight. And he didn't say anything about it, but 2 years later, he wrote his 5 children that he felt, instead of being 64, he said, I felt like I was 25. That means a lot to a man. And he said, I've lost 40 pounds. And when he told me he'd lost 40 pounds, I said, are you happy about that? He said, very. And he's become progressively a faster marathoner than he was. He did 12 marathons 1 year. Anyway, it applies to possibly all athletes except certain football players like, what's his name, Gonzalez, who became vegan and found that he was losing weight. And he couldn't afford to lose weight and have as high a position in the football world as he had. So for business reasons, he needed to hold on to the weight. But as soon as he got out of the football business, he was going 100% vegan. And he wrote a book about it.
It's interesting.
Can't think of the name of it right now. The world's leading ultra marathoner, a guy who runs 100-mile races on foot, is vegan. And he's a vegan cook, as a matter of fact. And he wrote a book about it, which has his recipes in it. So beware of us. We may be small and ordinary looking, but we're dangerous.
I will definitely not disagree with that. So, Mike, tell me some more. When you stopped eating fish, did you feel anything different in your body? No. It was pretty much the same as before and after, because you were anyways eating small quantities.
It wasn't important to me, but socially, it's convenient if you go to a restaurant, you order a piece of fish. Other people may have pork chops, or they may have steak, or whatever.
Yes.
Fish seems to be somewhat more non-threatening to your health, but actually fish is not a safe thing to eat. I don't think there's any fish that's safe to eat. In general, if you're eating fish, you want to eat small fish because they haven't had a chance to absorb enough poison. They haven't had as many years. And they haven't had the exposure to the toxins that are in the ocean or falling into the ocean from the atmosphere, like PCBs running off the soil into the rivers and then ending up in the ocean, or mercury, which comes from burning coal, because mercury, like gold, like uranium, all of those things are incorporated in minute amounts in coal. So the more coal we burn, the more mercury we put into the ocean. It gets into the fish, then we eat the fish, and it gets into us, and it does nasty things to us. Right. So these are good reasons also not to eat meats and fish, and meats and shellfish and poultry. The toxins that they ingest from the pesticides and herbicides that are sprayed, and they become part of us, just as genetically modified foods whose effects we don't know at all in the long term have upon us. And it's something to worry about, because genetically modified hundreds, thousands, millions of modifications of standard foods we have may have some effect upon some of us someday. And it's probably going to take 2 or 3 generations to find out exactly what those things are if we don't stay away from GMO foods now. I'm on my podium again.
Which is absolutely fine. And this is the opportunity for you to share your knowledge.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to again ask you a little bit more about your family.
Yeah.
So, Mike, tell me, do you have longevity running in your family?
No, I do not. My father died at 69 of liver cancer. My mother died at 79 of a heart attack. My sister died at 83, which is pretty good considering that she'd smoked since she was 17. Wow. But she wore a machine to give her oxygen in her last year. But she lived longer than they had. What's that buzzing around here?
I think there was a little bug.
Oh, it's a stink bug.
Yeah, stink bug.
Marilyn hates stink bugs, and she has an elaborate way of catching them.
Yeah, Nehal does too. Until when he told her that these are our pets. So now she's like, you can't let him out. He's a pet.
So, although I had a grandfather who lived to 88, he's the oldest one I know in the family I've known, or as I can find out from our history of our family going back. Genetically, I wasn't necessarily a good bet to last a long time. I was sickly as a child. I had asthma. It kept me out of school. It kept me undersized. So naturally I had to overcome that.
And were you, did you?
I believe that the asthma, believe it or not, was caused by my having to drink milk, which I didn't like.
That's a good point.
But milk can cause asthma.
Yeah. And how about your children? Do they follow the same lifestyle that you're following now?
Well, my son who sent me the book, the cancer prevention book, had been vegan for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And he even raised a large dog and fed him no meat.
That's interesting.
And the dog had boundless energy. I don't think it was necessarily good for the dog, but it was one of these big golden retrievers, you know. I saw that thing plunge down a mountain at tremendous speed, go down to a creek at the bottom, get all wet, and fly back up the hill. Just unbelievable energy on a vegan diet. It's a dog. But my other son hasn't reached the age. He just became 60, and he's very strong, very healthy. But I worry about him. He doesn't drink or smoke, and he does exercise a lot, so he's probably okay for a while. But when you hit 60, it's time to change. And if you don't change, you have your first heart attack. From then on, you will never, ever be confident that it won't happen again and kill you. And cancers are the same way. And I recommended anyone over 60, the earlier the better. But I tell all my buddies, listen, you're 60, things are going to happen to you that you wouldn't have expected. You're doing everything right, except you don't know that you're not eating right, and it may kill you. And it takes an investment that's more than worthwhile. It's a fight for people who don't feel themselves threatened. But anyway, that's my recommendation.
And doesn't cancer take several decades to develop in your body?
What's that?
Cancer takes several decades to develop.
Oh, yes, yes. The little things you get on your bald head, and have to have them frozen off. On your face, other parts of your body, actually. But I get a few on my head, and I have to have them taken off with, is it nitrogen, liquid nitrogen or carbon dioxide? Those, my doctor tells me, originated 30 to 40 years ago, and they're sun-caused. So I don't know whether diet has any impact on those or not. I really don't know.
But the truth is that they occurred in your body they happened 30 to 40 years ago when you were quite young.
That's right. They started 30 or 40 years ago.
And do you get any more of them? Did you get any more of them now?
He takes a few off every year. So I think they're sun-caused because I usually don't wear a hat, summer or winter. Mm-hmm. And my hair has somehow disappeared.
So Mike, we were talking about a whole food plant-based diet. And basically a whole food plant-based diet is a diet which is primarily whole foods, which means we are not eating any processed plant foods. We are eating fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lentils, legumes.
Sure.
And is that pretty much what the macrobiotic diet was?
In effect, yes. Definitely.
Great. And Mike, we were also talking about how there are toxins in animal foods. Do you have any thoughts on why don't we have that much toxin in plant foods?
Well, we have a certain amount. That's why you wash your vegetables. I would recommend organically grown vegetables instead of standard ones, if you can find them or if you can afford them. I think they're a good investment. It is said that the individual vegetable, in order to survive, to evolve, has had to generate protective measures for itself to discourage being eaten by certain insects, which may mean that it is beaten to the point where it can't reproduce. So vegetables have evolved with certain mechanisms that protect them, and in eating the vegetables, especially a variety of them, we are protecting ourselves by making their protective mechanisms part of us. And I hadn't heard that before, and it made some sense to me. So if we clean our vegetables, and especially if we get organically grown vegetables, we're the ideal position. If you doubt what vegetables can do for you, consider the elephant. It lives a long, long time. It's tough and dangerous. And they're pretty smart.
Right.
So they do it on nothing but green stuff. They're not interested in cats and dogs and deer and squirrels. So I feel I'm in the class of the elephants.
Yes, you're dangerous and you're fast. Mike, we were also talking about some of the ways in which the animal foods harm our body. I mean, why is it that, how does it really impact on our body?
Well, I don't consider myself an authority on this. I've read it many times that our bodies are, as I said, our blood is pH neutral, no matter what we do. But it takes excessive resources of our immune system to bring it back from the acid content of animal protein. And the difference between animal protein and vegetable protein, at least one difference that I've heard, is that the presence of one of the essential, what do they call them?
Amino acids.
What's that?
Amino acids.
Amino acids, yeah. Is methionine, which has uniquely the sulfur atom, which makes it somewhat acid, and therefore our body, on ingesting this particular protein with the methionine, has to make an extra effort to overcome the acid effect upon our blood, which is adamantly pH neutral. So you find that many other vegetable foods are essentially neutral or alkaline, as opposed to acid, which is much better for our bodies.
It's a great point. It's just that we are omnivores, and just because our body is able to process the animal
Yeah.
foods, we assume that those foods are fine for us.
Yeah.
But in reality, to have a long and healthy life, we are much better off on a whole foods plant-based diet
Yeah.
than we are on a
No question.
omnivorous diet.
There was a myth that the Eskimos are healthy, and they eat primarily seal meat, or did. I think they're getting smart these days, but they don't raise a lot of vegetables and fruits in Alaska or up where the Eskimos hang out. But in effect, they have heart attacks, serious ones. And they have probably the worst osteoporosis of any peoples on Earth. And osteoporosis is caused by the acid leaching calcium from our bones, which we cannot make up by drinking milk, thank you.
That is correct, yes.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, the proteins in the milk really stop the calcium absorption, so we
Yeah.
cannot really absorb the calcium from the milk.
Right.
And not to say that the milk is acidic in itself.
I'm successful in what I do here, being able to do what I do.
Yeah,
Right.
and I mean,
And it's easy to do. I mean,
It's easy to do,
once you
yes.
can overcome your
right,
lust for certain foods.
right.
And you know, it has some social difficulties which were much worse when I started 25 years ago. Nobody ever could imagine not eating fish or meat, or seafood, or milk, or eggs. And
Right.
you were pretty strange. Well, we're not quite so strange anymore, and I think that every chef coming out of a culinary institute today learns how to cook, shall we say, vegan foods. And many of the chefs themselves are vegan. So that if you go in a standard American restaurant, I don't mean a chain, unless it's a high quality, expensive place, the chefs there are glad to prepare you something because they don't get much chance to cook that. And it's pretty simple compared to some of the American dishes we get.
So that really solves the problem of socializing.
Things are a lot better today
Yeah.
than they were 25 years ago. Yeah,
Interesting.
in that regard.
Yeah, we just need to go and speak to the waiter or to the chef and say that we want this food, and there's a good chance that they will be able
For example, I made a reservation at a Japanese restaurant near here for us to have lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And I told the proprietor that we would like to have brown rice. She's Japanese. They only eat white rice, but they understand that some people want brown rice.
Right.
And so if we call them an hour before we go, at least an hour, then she has the time to prepare the brown rice for us.
Absolutely.
So people don't challenge you the way they used to, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But there are plenty of places in this country where there are deserts for vegans. They're absolute deserts. You can't.
Right.
There are even restaurants in Cincinnati where it's impossible to get anything decent to eat because everything either has cheese in it or it's meat,
Right.
or it has eggs in it.
Yes. Well, so,
So
the more we will, the more our numbers will be. As more and more people start calling those restaurants and saying that I would like to have brown rice and black beans, they will start preparing those dishes, right? Because they'll be like, the restaurants want to sell food, and if there are enough people asking for that, they will. So it's just that we need to be the people who are making this change.
it was probably 20 years from when I started to go to this particular Japanese restaurant to now that it took me that long to realize that they also had a Chinese menu. I thought they only had a Japanese menu. So I assumed that the only thing they made was Japanese food, but they say, we make Chinese too. Now you tell me, 20 years after I began to go there.
Now we can just take the video camera and have you talk a little bit about the trophy cupboard.
If you know champions, like Olympic champions, guys like Jimmy Terrell, who lives in Milford, and Roland Mullen, who lives out on the west side, both of those guys were Olympic champion canoe racers several times each. And back when Jimmy was doing these races, they had a stairwell to their basement, and it was filled with all their medals and plaques, awards. It was just, the house was full of them. And that's the way it is. Every race you get something, you hang it up. And they were in hundreds of races. So it's no big deal. And the medals don't cost that much anyway. Well, it's something for your children, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
One child or more may get interested in what his or her father did, you know.
Yeah, and I also think that, I mean, it's just such an inspiration for your grandchildren.
It could be. This was a 3-day, 100-mile canoe race in Quebec, Canada, that we did solo, or C1 as they call it. And 2 years in a row, 1990 and 91, I think they haven't had it since. It's part of held the same day as the Classique, which Labatt's beer supported at a cost of about $500,000 a year in those days. But they say if you have to portage a number of waterfalls, and they say if you don't run with your canoe, they throw rocks at you. So it's been a professional race, although this particular one, not the Classique, run the same day as amateurs, just one person per canoe. So it was a lot of fun.
Mike,
Yes.
we would love to know some more about your day-to-day routine. How does your day start? What do you do on a normal day?
On a normal day, I get up and go out and run 10 miles one day.
Okay.
And the next day, I may get up and canoe early in the morning, and then come back and have breakfast. But when I go out to run, it takes a long time because I know so many people at the park. I talk to them all, usually about health.
Yeah.
And therefore, it takes me a very long time, sometimes 3 hours, to run 10 miles when I'm actually going faster than that when I run. And I come back and I cook my breakfast, which consists of a soup, a vegetable soup, sometimes always with miso in it, and about 5 different vegetables, ranging from cauliflower to broccoli to onions to tomatoes to bok choy to cucumbers to kale. Well, I usually have kale separately every day, kale or collards. And then I'll have a couple of pieces of whole wheat toast, believe it or not, with a questionable addition on the surface called Earth Balance, EB, which is, I suppose, a type of margarine. However, that's a weakness of mine. I like buttered toast, and that's the nearest thing to it. That's my breakfast and lunch, usually, although in the afternoon I may have an apple or half a grapefruit or a banana or all of them, depending on how hungry I am. And then dinner, usual, not usual, but the regular dinner of some sort of vegetables mixed with grains or separate, or sometimes a whole grain pasta with tomato sauce, sometimes with sauce made of sesame seeds. What do they call that?
Tahini?
Tahini, yeah. Which my wife does very beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
And then some fruit again. And that's it. I eat great amounts, and I simply don't put on weight. Neither do I lose it. And it works for me.
So you don't have to do any kind of portion control.
Absolutely not.
No
Not
calorie
that-
counting
not that-
for you.
Maybe I should, but I don't. I don't need to,
Right.
and I don't question success. And I
I
feel,
think that's a good strategy.
in effect, I have not had a cold or a headache or a stomach ache in some 25 years that I've been on this diet.
Wow.
Believe it or not.
I completely believe you, and that is amazing.
I've had things happen to my legs and my shoulder, and accidents, running accidents, canoeing accidents, but nothing to my basic immune system or my general health. Despite the number of times I've been in hospitals, which is supposed to be very infectious, I've never contracted a disease from it.
That's really, really something. So you just said that you wake up in the morning and you go for a run or you go canoeing. You don't have anything before you go exercising? No?
Yes, I take a supplement. I use GU, GU, which is getting a little expensive, before I run. And then I take a second one at the 5-mile mark. So I'd probably take 2 GUs a day, which is maltodextrin. Everybody knows what those things are. Every runner knows these are supplements. Mm-hmm. They give you energy.
Okay.
So that if you're flagging after 5 miles and you take a GU, you start up again fresh.
All right.
And despite having components that may be threatening on a big scale, these things are consumed in the activity that you're doing, so they don't stick in your system forever.
Mm-hmm.
So there are other potions that once in a while I might take in a half marathon, because I'll be out there for several hours. You have to realize that a person my age, if I can win a world record at the age of 92, or 90 I guess, in 6 hours and 37 minutes, 6 hours of constant running.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when I was 60, I could do it in half that time.
Right.
30 years later, I'm twice as slow as I was when I was 60. When I was 60, I did a 3-hour and 20-minute marathon. Now it takes me did when I was 90, it took 6 hours and almost 40 minutes.
Right. Right.
So we deteriorate despite our best efforts.
Mm-hmm.
It's called capital AGE.
Absolutely, yeah. And are there any other supplements that you take, like vitamin B12 or anything else?
Because I'm vegan, I've been convinced by most of my gurus, who are Doctors McDougall, Barnard, Campbell,
Esselstyn?
Caldwell Esselstyn, Rip Esselstyn, and a few others, that I should take B12 vitamin, which is a vitamin gotten from the dirt that plant seems to grow in. I think it's an excretory product of bugs and animals and so
Right.
on, that's somehow sterilized from the... Anyhow, they say it's an essential vitamin, and it is not in the normal vegan diet. And if I were to pull carrots out of the ground and eat them the way they come out of the ground, I'd get all the B12 I needed.
Right, absolutely.
Plus maybe some
yes.
other stuff I don't want.
Right.
But that's the only supplement, the only medicine I take. And until further notice, that's all I'm going to take. There's some minor controversy about vitamin D3 that I sometimes take, but they say it's because you don't get enough sunlight in these latitudes.
Right, in Cincinnati.
And yet I haven't gotten sick whether I take it or not, so maybe I shouldn't take it. I don't know. Certainly in this weather, no matter how much sun you get, it's not going to help.
It is not going to help, yes, because of the angle of the sun.
And if I go to Florida and get sunburned in the wintertime, it comes out all dark brown spots all over my body. It looks terrible. So they're suggesting I use suntan glop of one kind or another. And then I say, well, I don't want those nanoparticles of titanium dioxide or zinc oxide
Right.
to penetrate their way to my brain. Well, they say that the particle size is too small for this. It's nanoparticles. So I'm not a scientist or an MD, so I sort of take it with a grain of salt.
I hear you, and it makes sense. Yeah.
I think it's better if you're going south and you have light skin, simply to go out before 10 o'clock or after 2 o'clock.
And wear a
And
good
there's
hat.
plenty of warmth and plenty of sun,
Right.
and be natural about it. And you certainly don't want to do tanning beds, no matter what they say.
So, Mike, we were talking about your cancer, and you said that you saw multiple doctors when you got cancer. What were some of the treatment options that were offered to you?
Oh no, they wanted to cut me open and take out the tumor. All 6 of them.
You saw 6 doctors?
Ultimately, I saw 6 doctors, 3 in Cincinnati and 3 at the Cleveland Clinic.
And they all of them recommended surgery.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Did they also recommend other treatments like chemotherapy and radiation?
No, not one of the 6. This was in 1991. That was early in the, should we say, vegan movement. And the doctors who said try food were sneered at and frowned upon, and are generally not part of the conversation in those days. They weren't trusted, they weren't believed in. So I was one of not too many people who were on this kind of a diet by choice, by change of diet. So you learn to accept what restaurants have left to offer you out of the standard fare that they offer the general public. But if you ask them and pester them enough, they'll usually give you what you need if you go to them regularly.
Right. I hear what you're saying. Yep. Yeah.
As you did today.
As we did today. Mike, thank you very much for today, and I'm really, really appreciative of your time and everything. I just have one last question for you. Give us your thoughts on how we as a population, we as a people, become healthier.
There's just innumerable reasons to change from the standard American diet. Just huge numbers. I don't possess these numbers. But our health care is a measure, the cost of our health care is a measure of our health. And it's tremendous. I think they're moving it up from $9,000 a year per person in this country. They're moving it up from that, I don't know how far up. That's a measure of our health. People are impressed by the number of hospitals being developed in Cincinnati. What are these hospitals for? Why are we so unhealthy? We ought to be like the squirrels out there who live from year to year no matter what the weather is. We haven't been this way all our lives. I mean, we have all our lives, but not all our history in this country. It's just a terrible mistake that we get off on the wrong food and we're deeply ensconced in it and we think there's no other way, and we're constantly told to eat bad stuff because of the interests of the meat industry, the egg industry, and the poultry and the milk industry. They want to make money off our illness because we're going to get ill. The hospitals are going to make money off our illness. The doctors are going to make money off our illness. We suffer. Not only do we pay, but we suffer. We die young. We shouldn't die so young. It's absurd. And we should never, ever raise our children on the standard American diet. Never. It's a terrible mistake. And a little research on anybody's part will, I promise you, tell you that when I'm giving you the straight stuff on this. I have no axe to grind except the health, the welfare, and the persistence of the people of this country to live. Anyway, I get a little bit passionate about it. Please excuse me.
It's absolutely fine. And when you say die young, we don't need to die young, you mean we don't need to die in our 60s and 70s, right?
No.
Because, yeah, I mean, we all deserve to live a healthy 80 or 90-year-old long life, just like you.
Well, I read the obituaries, and not because I'm interested in seeing people die and read about people who just died. It's that the ages are getting higher. We are living somewhat longer. Science is helping us. Medicine is improving. We're getting the message, but it's so slow. And we should never, ever raise our kids to do what we did. We made mistakes. I made terrible mistakes. And fortunately, I was able to escape from the worst consequences of those mistakes. But what I believe I've said today is wise and appropriate from what I've learned. It's a very important lesson. I wish you all the best, and
Thank you, Mike.
I think that the plant foods idea is a good one.
Thanks. I just have one more thing, Richard. So, Mike, what about the people who are already old, who are in their 60s, who are in their 70s? Do you think they still have hope?
Yeah, I think even if they're in nursing homes, they have some hope, because I think they would find that their quality of life greatly improves even if the taste of their food for a few weeks as they adapt to a new diet would disappear. In other words, they'd be happy with the new diet if they had it for a few weeks. They wouldn't miss the old diet, and they would have just renewed vigor. It's a whole new lease on life. It's a new life. It's being born again, in effect. And it happened to so many of the people I've talked to in the past 25 years who have adopted this diet. It's a coming thing. Look, you got guys like Bill Clinton, who had heart trouble, and then he had stents put in, and then the stents got clogged up and he had to have new stents put in. And finally he got interested in why he was getting heart attacks. He changed his diet. Look at him now. He's lost a lot of weight. He's healthy. He's out there campaigning for his wife. And who should come after that but Al Gore? Al Gore is a vegan. Both of those guys are vegan. It's not because they're Democrats either. It's because they're smart.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you.